there's an American flag that flies in front of the restaurant. So at that dinner, I asked Mr. Bocuse, I was like, why do you fly the American flag? And he says, well, I was in World War II when I was shot. And I was left in the field and an American soldier found me and gave me a blood transfusion. He says, so jokingly, I always say I have American blood running through my veins. He says, but holistically, I want us to never forget why we're here because the Americans saved us through that time. Mm-hmm. And so I fly the American flag in honor of that. So we have a bakery, Bellecour, which Bellecour is the center of Lyon, France. It's a square. So it's called Place Bellecour. And so before Mr. Bocuse died, I asked him, I told him this story and asked him if I could share it with others, and he granted me the yes to do so. But we named the restaurant and the bakeries Bellecour because it was one of the first squares to be taken over by the French. So in honor of the French always teaching me how to be a hospitalitarian and a chef, we call it Bellecour in honor of Paul Bocuse.
We're live, man.
We're live. Let's go.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time, man. I'm excited and also grateful, and I know I bugged you a bunch of times about this. All right, so we're going to jump in because I want to make sure we make the most of this time.
Yeah.
And you're obviously this incredibly talented chef with a bunch of accolades. Everybody knows what they are, so I don't need to sort of dive into them. But what comes up every time I hear your name or I talk about you is, man, he's so helpful. He's so nice. I was chatting with Sean Gale yesterday.
Yeah.
Just opened in Houston. He was on the show. And he couldn't stop talking about, like, I've never worked with Gavin before, but he's just always been so helpful. Where does that come from?
You know, it's funny. Honestly, it's probably my dad. Like, it's the one thing I hear about my father all the time too, is like, I'll be in the restaurants and, you know, we'll have a guest at the bar in the dining room and they'll say, oh, I know your dad. I worked with him 20 years ago at X company. And I say, oh, that's cool. Yeah. You know, and they're like, he's just so nice. He's like the nicest guy. And I think like hearing that over and over and over again for so long, I just remember as like a kid being like, that's a really nice thing for people to say about you, right? Like it can be there can certainly be an alternative, but you know, I think also just like what you expect to get out, you got to sort of like do the work too, you know, what you want to get out of the world. And I think, you know, we all have questions on like how to get from point A to point B, and we don't necessarily need to know the answer, but if you know somebody who can help you figure it out and you reach out to them and then they give back to you, it's like pay it forward.
Yeah. Was there anything that happened, some sort of event that was a catalyst for, oh, I got to be nice and I have to make sure that I'm thoughtful to everybody? It's not that it's not common.
Yeah.
But the frequency of which I hear it about you means I feel like there's something, you know, inner that's like pushing that.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, not necessarily. I don't think anything like necessarily happened. I think a lot of it probably just has to like go back to the hospitality bug. You know, I mean, what I do in the restaurants and taking care of the guests and taking care of my team, like it's no different. You know, I think there's a discipline to it. I was talking to somebody the other day about this and they asked me, they said, you know, what's some advice you can give to a young chef? And I was like, look, stay disciplined, stay curious, right? Because just those two traits alone, just start with two. Like that's really hard to do. It's hard to stay disciplined and it's hard to stay really curious about things. And, you know, I've had the pleasure and the luxury of traveling and working alongside both Danielle Boulud and Thomas Keller for years. I mean, the last 15 years at least. And the one thing I can say about both of them is that they're always so curious still. 70 years old and you know, having what they have, I'm not sure curiosity necessarily needs to be a trait that they hold on to.
Yeah. This keeps coming up in every conversation I have about creativity and innovation. And just creating great anything, food, art. It's a prerequisite. If you're not curious, you're never going to really like innovate. You know?
And I think it's harder now to keep curiosity because everything's so instantly at your fingertips. So, you know, if you have a question, I mean, listen, like I have 3 sons, but the age gap is different, is big, 15, 13, and 2.5. But like my 13-year-old will say, you know, or I'll say to him, hey, you know, his name's Julius, we call him Juju. Juju, you know, what's the answer to this question? He grabs his phone and, you know, Chat GPT. What's the answer to this question?
Yeah.
And it's like, there's no, like struggle to even figure out like what's the answer.
You know, it's funny. I see the flip side of that. I mean, at least for me, I don't know. I can't think about for my kids if they do this yet, but like, because everything's already available.
Yeah.
Almost every night, like after I'm done with work, I'm like, what do I want to learn tonight?
Yeah.
You can basically learn anything you want.
True. Yeah.
And now you have ChatGPT and, Gemini and Grok, all these things. You can literally become an expert on anything.
Yeah.
And it's wild.
Yeah.
And it's actually created this new spark of curiosity for me because, sometimes it's overwhelming. Like, oh, I'd love to learn, how to, I'd love to learn about like Renaissance painting and Leonardo da Vinci. And you can read a book, but like you can get a ton of detail really quick and ask questions.
Listen, that's a really good perspective because I think that you have kids, but too, so it's like when you raise your children, like, there's always this inevitable like, generationally it's different and they have this and they have that or they're spoiled or whatever. But to your point, like there is a positive to it. But curiosity, I think, is something that is like the thorough line of creativity and growth.
I think also having an imagination, I realized from watching my kids, is something that you have to teach and nurture. We read books to our kids every single night. They get they get a book together or two books together, and then they each get their own. Once a week, we do a makeup story where they get to make it up, but we use GPT.
Cool.
And so I don't know if you've ever done this, but you can basically tell ChatGPT, tell me a story in the vein of, Dr. Seuss, and there's a unicorn and an elephant, and you come up with all of these things. And so we have our kids come up with the premise, come up with the characters, up with the problem and the antagonist. And it's hard. We realize it's actually hard. They kind of just want to do the same thing every time, and you have to like push them.
Yeah.
But that like imagination is also a muscle.
Yeah, it is.
And it's so cool to see when it's also what is so exciting for me of all the new possibilities there are because of, AI to do things like that.
Yeah.
All right. So clearly really nice person, but you also, I think this is true. You steal spoons.
I borrow them.
Can you tell me
I just never give them back.
All right. Tell me about that.
So it started early on when I was in Switzerland. I was working at a restaurant called Auberge de Lavaux. And I was the only department that spoke enough English for me to understand what was going on was pastries. And so I was in the pastry kitchen. I was doing the quenelles of sorbets and ice creams on the plate, right? And Cyril was our pastry chef. And Cyril ended up moving to Paris probably a couple months after I started. And I was convinced that his spoon was the reason I could do a quenelle correctly. So I just took his spoon. And as we had 2 days off. We were off Sunday, Monday. And because, when you're in Switzerland, you kind of can go everywhere in Europe pretty quickly on the train.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my 2 days, I'd go to Italy or I'd go to Paris or wherever, and I would just like go around. And I realized that when I would go to these restaurants, for whatever reason, I would end up taking a spoon as like a memory of the restaurant, but I wouldn't take the menu. I wouldn't have like a postcard or like I wouldn't have matches or whatever. And then after a while, I was like, okay, this is like how I remember where I was. And then that just kind of kept growing and growing and growing. And so, thousands of spoons later, here we are.
I mean, at what point did it catch on that like, oh, he's here, he will take a spoon?
Oh, it was pretty early on. I mean, honestly, I remember having dinner at True. Do you remember that restaurant in Chicago?
Of course, yeah.
So I remember having dinner there, and I will never forget it for two reasons. One, there were these two women sitting sort of across the restaurant from me, but in my eyesight. And I was dining there alone. And do you remember that caviar staircase that Rick used to do?
Mm-hmm.
It was like that glass caviar staircase. And it was like so cool and so different from how people would serve caviar. In any event, they both ordered it. But one woman, after she ate the caviar off the staircase, she put it in her purse, the whole staircase.
Nice.
Okay, to take it. The server says nothing. He takes everything away. And when they go to drop the check, the woman looks at the bill and must have seen that the caviar staircase was also on the bill because it was in her purse. She closes the bill, takes the caviar staircase out of her purse and puts it on the table. A server quickly comes by and grabs the staircase and the check, readjusts the check and drops it. So I look at him and I said, hey, can I take a spoon? Like, I'm happy to pay for the spoon.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine worked there in the kitchen. And when he brought me the check, he said, sir, my buddy, told us that you like to steal spoons, and he opened up the bill and there was like a spoon and it was wrapped.
Yeah.
And then it said on the bill, like spoon, $0, gift to the restaurant. So I've definitely had times in which that's happened.
So instead of mid-courses, you get spoons.
Exactly.
I actually brought you one.
All right, let's go.
You already have it, I guarantee. But he's my mentor, and
Amazing.
I always put, we give this to everybody, and I put a little note in there.
The great
For everybody
spoon.
that if you happen to see this on the video, GK is not Gavin Kaysen.
It's not. It's great case. This is beautiful. I don't have this one, so thank you.
My favorite is the smaller Coon spoon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the little tiny one.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, his spoons are so great. I know. Yeah, it is funny. GK, right? Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I mean, of all the things to bring, I figured that was the...
Yeah, heck yeah.
So I arrived here in Minneapolis today, and I got to the restaurant, and I needed the Wi-Fi password. I was like, what's the network? And I don't know if I can tell you the password, but the network is Bocuse.
Yeah.
Password's an obvious one. But what does Bocuse mean to you? I mean, he means a lot to a lot of people, but...
Yeah, you know, I mean, I can kind of say through some stories. I mean, you know, the first time that I ever met him was in 2005. And I had just won the International Trophy of Cuisine and Pastries, which is not affiliated with Bocuse d'Or.
Mm-hmm.
But Pierre Gagnier was the head chef, and he said to me, like, you should do the Bocuse d'Or, to which I had no idea what he was talking about. I'm like, what is the Bocuse d'Or? Of course, I looked it up, studied it, understood what it was all about. I said, oh, this is great. So I went to Lyon, and I had dinner there with one of my friends, a mentor named Jean-Jacques Dietrich. And we ate in the kitchen at, quote unquote, the chef's table. It was nothing more than the corner chef's office, but he put us there at the table. And Mr. Bocuse took care of us. And it was just
How old was he at the time?
So let's see, it's 2025 now. He was probably
20 years ago.
He was probably in his late 70s or early 80s. Probably his late 70s, because he died when he was 92.
Yeah. Was he like pretty like mobile?
He was active, man. I mean, he laid into one of their interns for cutting the melon incorrectly. I mean, he was active, running around the kitchen. You know, it was crazy. He just had this innate ability to allow you to feel as though you were the most important person in that restaurant, even though everybody in that restaurant was incredibly important. And he had this innate ability to inspire literally generations. I mean, if you think about what he's done for our profession, he changed the way that we serve and present food.
Yeah.
You know, he was part of the generation that stepped out of the kitchen to show that, hey, it's not the maitre d' who's making all this food. There's a chef back there in the kitchen with a team of chefs and a brigade who's making all this food, and let me introduce you to them. And let me be the face of them and help that out. And it was really special. So through the years,
sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but like, how did he make each person feel like they were the most important person in the room? Was it just how he listened, or?
Yeah, he you never felt rushed by conversation with him, if that made sense. You know, like, you know, so you talk to certain people in the restaurant and like they're looking at you, but they're also like looking behind you, and you know it, like you feel that they're looking, like we're table 55, that's table 56.
Yeah.
So if I'm talking to you, but table 56 is like really super VIP, and you see my eyes kind of going all the way always to 56, like it makes you feel a little bit different. He just never did that.
Yeah.
I think that type of person and that trait, that is not a teachable trait.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's truly a genuine spirit. Danielle has the same spirit.
Yeah.
And so I really fell in love with the idea of French cuisine and French hospitality early on. That only solidified it. What was pretty crazy, you get to his restaurant, and have you ever eaten at his restaurant in Lyon?
No.
Okay, so when you get there from the freeway or from the main road, it kind of looks like a circus. Like it's Bocuse, massive letters of Bocuse, you know, and you can't miss it. But you get into the restaurant and it's an exceptional meal, but there's an American flag that flies in front of the restaurant. So at that dinner, I asked Mr. Bocuse, I was like, why do you fly the American flag? And he says, well, I was in World War II and I was shot, and I was left in the field, and an American soldier found me and gave me a blood transfusion. He says, so jokingly, I always say I have American blood running through my veins. He says, but holistically, I want us to never forget why we're here, because the Americans saved us through that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I fly the American flag in honor of that. So we have a bakery, Bellecour, which Bellecour is the center of Lyon, France. It's a square. So it's called Place Bellecour. And so before Mr. Bocuse died, I asked him, I told him this story and asked him if I could share it with others. And he granted me the yes to do so. But we named the restaurant and the bakeries Bellecour because it was one of the first squares to be taken over by the French. So in honor of the French always teaching me how to be a hospitalitarian and a chef, we call it Bellecour in honor of Paul Bocuse.
Yeah. I mean, it also sounds like that has an impact on this sort of kindness that you have, right? Because it's really just being present. It sounds like he's present. He's there with you, which is the kindest thing you can do for somebody is be present for them when they're talking to you.
Yes.
And it sounds like that rubbed off on you.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the Bocuse d'Or was either when I started, not when I started cooking, but like I remember I traveled to Norway with Eric Repair and Rick Moonen and Marco Samuelson when I was very young, like 19. And we traveled the country and then we ate at this restaurant called Oro, and the guy that had opened it, Terje Ness, had just won the Bocuse d'Or in '99. I'm like, what is this? And I just remember being that's what like that was sort of the turning point for me. Like, oh, this is what I need to do. It's amazing. Yeah. And there is something about that not just that competition, but like there's a lot of amazing chefs. But that sort of path of like, attempting the Bocuse d'Or does sort of create another kind of just another direction of how you cook. You can see it in the food, the precision and kind of thought. Has that affected how you cook as well? Obviously, it affects how you think and how you make people feel.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately it affects the way that I think about food and how we cook. But it's a niche. I mean, Bocuse d'Or is like in Norway, it changes people's lives. In America, 9.5 people out of 10 have no idea what it is.
Why is that?
Media. We don't talk about it. It's also not relatable. I mean, think about it this way. I mean, was Formula One as big now? Formula One seems very big right now and popular. Was it as popular prior to the Netflix special?
It's true.
Probably not. But the media sort of showed us this different world of Formula One that it was intriguing and, if not relatable, was entertaining at the very least. Bocuse d'Or, you have 24 international chefs from all over the world, all sorts of different languages happening. We're all wearing a white jacket with white apron with black trousers and black shoes and a white toque. It's very old school in that regard. It sets to hold on to like, what does that professionalism mean back then and how does that translate now? You don't see any chef in a t-shirt. You don't see them with rolled up pants. You don't see them with hat backwards. I mean, frankly, like now you can do it now, but like you used to have to be shaven, like totally clean shaven to show up. So I think that's kind of unrelatable to a lot of people, right? And it also is different than what our profession looks like in the media.
Yeah.
Right. So it's hard to sort of see. But my point being is that the reason I love it and the reason that I'm part of it and have been for so many years is because I love that attention to professionalism. I love that attention to history and what it means. And I think that institutional knowledge that is brought in and carried on a daily basis when you're part of that competition, it's you can't ever get that back. I mean, what we learn, what we hear, the connections we have around the world, the people because of the competition.
Yeah.
It's a small group.
So, in a restaurant, you can have super delicious food, but it might not actually be the most pristinely well executed.
Sure.
And maybe it makes people feel a certain way. And
vice versa.
And vice versa. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of that, right?
Yeah.
But how do you win the Bocuse d'Or? Like, what? Obviously, there's no like environment you're trying to present. I presume, or this feeling you're trying to do. So it seems not mechanical, but like, what are the elements of how you actually win the Bocuse d'Or?
Like simply said, although it's not this simple, is you have 5.5 hours and about 10 bites to determine if you're the best in the world or not, right? But it's not just the food, right? It's the platter, it's the presentation, it is the way in which you can communicate your country's cuisine to 23 chefs. There's 24 down there, but 23 are from a different nation. So how does an American chef put forward their food in a competition and relate it to the Mauritius chef or, the chef from Colombia
Mhm.
or France or Italy, how does, and how does the Italian chef, I'll tell you, like I've judged that competition, I think 3 cycles. I can't remember what year it was that I was judging, but I was sitting next to, I think, the Italian chef. And I remember we were tasting a dish and the competition was done. The results were already out. And I asked him, I said, did you think that dish was the winning dish? And he's like, no, not at all, because of the way he tasted it. And I just, to your point, like, it's so interesting. Like, what is that one thing? And I don't think anybody necessarily knows. I think it's a combination of a lot.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to, what's the main ingredient? This year they went really kind of old school in terms of the theme. It was a big head scratcher for a lot of us because for so long the competition had been trying to be like a little bit more avant-garde and in many respects like more relatable, right? Like, okay, do one platter, which you never see in a restaurant anymore, right? And then the second thing we're going to judge you on is just like a beautifully designed, composed plate of food that you would see in a Michelin star restaurant. Yeah. And while that's like always still available, like there's sort of unspoken rules of what that needs to look like.
Yeah. What is the most profound, if you can think of the most profound piece of food that you recall from all your years of seeing the Bocuse d'Or?
There's definitely dishes and there's definitely platters that changed the trajectory of how Bocuse d'Or went. I remember in 1999 was one of those years when the Norwegian chef put up his food because Yannick Alino took second place in that one. And their theme was pigeon. It was squab. I remember Yannick's food going up and it was slightly overcooked and you could see it and you could see it on his face. And everybody knew France lost. At least that were like that in tune to like what was happening. When Phil Tessier in 2015 did his platter, it was a platter that had never really been done before in that competition with sort of this like false bottom and suspension and wires. And nobody had ever attempted to create some sort of type of architecture on a platter like that. That changed the way a lot of people then did platters moving forward for years. And still, even 10 years later, we still see platters now that are similar to what Phil's were. But prior to that, you never saw those platters.
Yeah.
So you see things like that. The Japanese chef who took third place in 2007, he did a platter that looked like a book. And then he did a bento box, which had never been done at Bocuse d'Or because the fear was always like the majority of the judges won't understand it.
Yeah.
And he was gambling that like the majority of these judges have all traveled enough to Japan to understand it. And he was right. But the courage to do something like that in a competition that is otherwise so European centric and traditional was really like mind blowing for a lot of people.
Yeah. I want to shift to mentoring because it seems like that's a big part of your life. What is Mentor BKB? What is that?
So it was an organization founded Thomas Keller, myself, Danielle Boulud, and Jerome Bocuse. We started that organization. We're 16 years old now. I was working for Danielle at the time when that all began. And really the impetus of why it began was I had just done the Bocuse d'Or myself in 2007. I was working in San Diego. So I left San Diego, took my job with Danielle to be the chef at Cafe Boulud. And after the competition, I was in debt about $250,000. And so platters, traveling to France,
wow,
food, paying for your food that you have to practice with. The year that I competed, we had to use Norwegian halibut, which we would ship in overnight from Norway, and their king crab. And then we had to use poulet de Bresse. And the only way I could practice with the chicken was to fly to France.
That's crazy.
And so like I would go to France and like live there for 2 weeks and just work with the chicken for 2 weeks and then come back home. And
so basically if you compete in the Bocuse, you're just going to have this massive bill that then...
I don't know. I mean, not anymore, but that's what Mentor does. That's one of the things Mentor does. But certainly in my year, prior to my year, like if you look at the faces of all of the people that have competed for United States from 1987 till now, prior to, and frankly, I worked in a hotel. So basically everybody up until my year, including me, was in a hotel. Mm-hmm. And the hotel would typically like support you, right? And the hotel I worked for in San Diego, they were very supportive of me. But there were things that they were simply not going to pay for.
Yeah.
Understood. So I went out and found sponsors and I just cold called people. I was 25 years old and I was like, hey, 26 maybe. Could I have free this? Could I do that? Whatever it takes. And I looked like a race car driver. I mean, my chef coats were just like stacked, you know? So when I started to work for Danielle in 2008, he said, do you want to do Bocuse d'Or again? I said, yes.
Why do you think he wanted you to do it?
Why did he want me to do it? I don't know if he wanted it. He just thought, you could do it. You work for me now, and why not? You can do it. You just did it. He says, what do you need? I said, I need 6 months off and $500,000. He's like, yeah, that's not going to work. You're my chef at Cafe Boulud. I can't give you that time away. So we went to Paris. We sat down with Regis Marcon and Yannick Alino and just sort of like listened, like, how did the French create their organization? Took a bunch of notes, went back, and as the story goes, Mr. Bocuse asked Danielle to reach out to Chef Keller and ask Thomas if he would be the president for Team USA, because the US had never done well. We had never done better than 6th place. And so we were in Napa for an event with Danielle, and Regis was there with us. And we asked Thomas if he would participate. And he didn't necessarily say no, but he definitely did not say yes. And he was kind of like reluctant, like, what is this going to mean?
What is his trepidation? What do you think his trepidation was?
Well, the simple thing of like, whatever anybody says to us, don't worry, it's not going to take any time.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's all good. Like, I'll take care of everything for you. Like, it's the number one thing where you hear like that just in itself already took me way more time. So he said, okay, let me think about it. We left lunch. We had lunch at Bouchon. We left lunch. Danielle called Mr. Bocuse, told him how the lunch went. Mr. Bocuse called Thomas, said, I want you to be the president for Team USA. Will you accept? And he said, yes, chef.
Because
you're not going to say no to Paul Bocuse.
Yeah.
And so he became the president for Team USA, and then Mentor was then formed. And at the beginning, Mentor was formed solely for this intention of training, funding, and building a foundation for Team USA. Now what it does do that, but now what it also does is that it grants scholarship money to young culinarians around the country to live and work and stage anywhere they want in the world. So like we just granted 20 plus young cooks around the country to live and work around the world. That's wherever amazing. They want. And the goal of that was like when you and I grew up cooking, you know, how did we go and stage at a restaurant? You go in the back door, you knock on the back door, you walk in the front door, or you might know somebody who knows somebody, but A, you're not getting paid. B, the circumstances probably aren't really that great to be in. And C, how much are you really going to learn and how much can you really be there? Because from an affordability perspective, you still have bills to pay.
Yeah. So
we decided to take all that away and say, you tell us where you want to go. It's 2 months. We'll pay your salary. You don't get to take a vacation you don't double dip, right? You don't take PTO from the restaurant you're working at. You go to Japan and you study for 2 months in Japan at the restaurant you've always dreamt to work at. Then you come back to the restaurant that allowed you to do it and you stay with them for a while. At least a year.
So there's a minimum of stay. Yeah.
Listen, you can't force anybody to stay, but you know, I think that, you know, there's an unspoken rule in that, and respect and politeness that you should do that. And it's been really powerful.
Yeah.
You know?
So, you know, just sort of in the realm of mentorship, obviously now you're mentoring a lot of people, you're teaching all these, you know, I mean, across all your restaurants, and not just at your restaurants, I'm sure, just generally speaking. But I'm curious what you think the role of the mentee is, because I think that gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think mentorship, being a mentor or a mentee, it's such a two-way street. I think if you are a mentee and you're giving your mentor 85% of your best, don't expect more than 50% from them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you really need to work at it, and you really need to show that there is a reason for them to want to continue to mentor you and teach you. It also doesn't mean that they need to be there for you every single time and to be doing everything for you. I think also reaching out, everyone, look, I still have mentors, Danielle being one of them. And it's nice to just call them. Hey, how you doing? How are you doing? I don't need anything. I'm just calling to see how are you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is important because it's a relationship and it's not a one-way relationship. Like, hey, get me this, get me that, or I'm out. As a mentee, it's like, what else can we learn here? So I agree with you. I think and I also think it's hard. I think what's difficult about being a mentee is that you think that you can go and pick your mentor. And that's not always the case. It can be, but it's hard to sort of go out there and actively say like, you're going to be my mentor. You know, you need to develop a relationship and be like, okay, do I vibe with this person?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes to that, you can have that candid conversation of saying, hey, really would love for you to help mentor me through this next stage of my life. And if it takes up too much of your time, please let me know and I'll learn how to back off, but I'm hungry for it.
Yeah.
What do I have to do?
Yeah. And I do think that there's, there is a lot of onus on the person that wants to learn to, one, like, show that you take action on the things that you've learned from your mentor. And then I had the lesson early on. I think I probably talked about this before, so sorry if I have, but I remember vividly, like my first job in New York after Norway, I was working for Rick Moonen, and I had to choose between repair and Moonen.
Yeah.
I chose Moonen.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned a ton there, by the way.
Yeah, of course.
But I remember there's a dressing for the crab cake. It's basically like this, you make a pepper confit and then you emulsify it with egg yolks and all this other stuff, fish sauce, blah, blah, blah. And really, really delicious. And he was just going to show me how to make it. He's like, okay, I'm going to show you how to make it today. And so he shows up in the morning and I walk over. I'm like, all right, let's do it. And he's like, where's all the mise en place? Let's go. Yeah. Let's get it. He's like, he said it a little bit meaner than this, maybe a lot meaner than this, but basically the gist of it was, you don't just get to learn.
Yeah.
This isn't school.
Yeah.
Like, you have to earn the right to learn.
Yeah.
Like, have everything weighed out, ready, plus think about whatever else you think I might need, so that when I come in, I know that you actually, took all the effort to learn. And I think that's, that for me is one of the most important things. If you have a mentor, is show them like you're willing to put in a lot of effort, because it's a lot of effort both ways,
Yeah, it is. No, it's a good lesson.
Yeah. What do you think you've taught Danielle? He's taught you a lot, but.
Yeah, he's taught me a lot. I think I've probably taught him, a lot about partnerships and trust. And Café Boulud, in his mind, is such an important brand. It's a really personal brand to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think by allowing anybody to be that chef of that restaurant, you have to give them the trust to do so. But you have to earn that. And it took time. Of course, it always takes time to earn that. But I think I've taught him that. I think I've for sure have taught him this whole world of Bocuse d'Or, because he wasn't involved in it before we got involved in it together. So that's been a different part. I mean, of course he knew about it, but involvement and knowing is two different things.
Yeah. What are some things that you think people often get wrong when they enter into a partnership?
I think a couple of things. I think one, if you only believe it to be a transactional experience, it's going to be really tough. There's ebb and flows of partnership. So there's highs and lows. There's relationship driven to it. But everything still stems from respect. Like, do you respect the person? You don't necessarily have to like the person. And at some point you may not, and that's okay. But do you have respect for them and what they bring to the table? And do you respect it enough to invite that criticism that they're going to offer or compliment? And what does that look like? Partnerships can be really difficult. Michael White told me, I don't know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, he's like, partnerships and investors are all like snowflakes. They all fall differently. And it's like, it's really true. I mean, like, they're all formed differently. They all fall differently. They all become different. But I think in general, especially in our business, partnerships have such a short-lived relationship. And there tends to be can be negativity around it, or difficulty or frustration, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I found mostly through screwing up often. I mean, I'm married. I have a co-founder for my business. I find that, like, you don't have to agree. That's important. You don't have to agree, but you don't have to agree on most of the decisions, but you have to be aligned on the values and the vision.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Like, actually be honest, like, oh yeah, we both agree this is actually how we believe this company should operate.
Yeah.
And that this is what good looks like. As long as you have that, I feel like every disagreement is fine.
Well, and the values will change.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, that I think people sort of lose sight on, is that if we entered into a business partnership now and we created our 5 core values, you can't put those in a box and lock them away
100%.
and think those are going to live forever. You need to revisit them over and over again. And really, when's the right time? Because people will say, well, how do you know when?
Yeah.
When you have that first disagreement.
Yeah.
Because the first disagreement, you're not disagreeing over the glass for water. You're disagreeing over the value of why do people need water.
Yeah.
So it's different.
100%. It is really hard. I mean, it comes up for me often.
We just went through it here at Spoon. We just went through we have these these 10 sort of what we call the kitchen legacy rules at Spoon or at Soigné and the whole company. And I want to say this is probably the fourth version, maybe the third version that we've written.
Yeah.
It's not that an argument or a disagreement got us there to rewrite it. It was a recognition of not only the chefs of the restaurant, but even some of the cooks saying, hey, this is different than when we started.
Yeah.
We're seeing the new cooks come in and be this way, but when we came in, we were that way.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, that there wasn't resentment. It was just an acknowledgement, to which it sort of then we raised our flag up and said, let's revisit these values together as a team, to which we did. And it was and I will tell you, since then, it's just one of those great things, because it's just like you feel the air get let out a little bit.
Yeah.
No,
100%. That happened with us recently as well. And I try to every year revisit my personal values and also the company, what we call them first principles.
Mm-hmm.
So the one that never changes is what we call operational empathy. I think this is at Mies, because, we're servicing restaurants and most of our team is, engineers and product people and, marketing, and they have no fucking idea that you don't call a restaurant at 11:30
right
and expect an answer and don't schedule a thing. And if you schedule something, show up, things that, and explaining what operational empathy means is something we do often. And we always sort of use it on a weekly, monthly basis of explaining, scenarios. But there's other things that, as we grow, it may have been far more collaborative in the beginning, and now it's more about radical ownership, in a bigger company. Yeah. And, people have to be like, taking full ownership. And these things, they I think they just naturally change as you grow a business. They also tend to, for better or for worse, also kind of weed people out, I think. I don't know if you found that, but like sometimes someone's right for the company at a certain size, and then you grow and they're like, no, maybe you need to go, onto someplace small again.
Yeah.
Has that happened to you?
Yeah. And it's tough. I mean, that's hard when that happens, because, those people help get you to where you then are. And, the empathy is to find a way to put them in a place where they belong. But the reality is maybe that's not with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a tough place to be.
How is your partnership with Andrew?
Oh, it's good. Yeah, I mean, we have KZ Provisioning together, our sports catering business.
How did you end up partnering with Andrew Zimmern?
So Andrew's been a dear friend forever. I mean, I knew Andrew before he was on TV and all that stuff. He used to do he came here to go into rehab 30-something years ago. He was then he was a chef at a restaurant called Café Un du Trois. Then he was a writer. And when I met Andrew, he was writing for the local magazine and he was doing radio. And so like I would come home from New York and I would do his radio show with him. And then, I would do like the plugs like, yeah, and you're listening to whatever with Andrew Zimmern, whatever the plug was. So we've known each other a really, really long time. And so when I went to open Spoon and I was raising money for the restaurant, he came on as an investor with us, kind of a chef block. It was 4 chefs that put money in and bought a unit. And so he owns a small percentage of Spoon. And then I had this idea. So after that, we went into Viking Stadium together when the Vikings opened their new stadium. And we had, I think, 2 or 3 concession stands there. And he brought me in and he's like, hey, do you want to just take 50%? We'll go 50-50 on it. You help develop the recipes with me. This is what we have to do. Not that much work. I'm like, yeah, sure. And it really wasn't, that much work in the grand scheme of things. So once that sort of went away, 2 of my close friends play pro hockey. One still plays with the Wild. The other one plays in Buffalo. And I went to go visit him after practice one day, and I'm sitting in the room. We're all having lunch, and we're eating fish sticks. And I'm kind of looking around thinking how much hundreds of millions of dollars in payroll this is. And I'm like, wow, you're eating fish sticks.
Are you talking commodity fish sticks? Or are they at least like good fish sticks?
They were from a restaurant or from like a catering service. I don't know, restaurant. And they were from a catering service. So I said, well, what's tomorrow? They're like, well, tomorrow's what, Wednesday? I said, yeah. They're like, burritos. I'm like, Thursday? Pizza. I'm like, are you serious? They're like, yeah, every day we just get it catered in. So I came up with this business plan to effectively take over the practice facilities where all the teams were and cook for the players every single day, breakfast, lunch, post-game, pre-game, dinner, whatever they wanted. And we would cook for the families during the games in a private suite. And they got me a meeting with the general manager of the Wild, and he signed us a deal.
Wow.
And so, and I said to Andrew, I said, do you want to go in on it 50-50? I said, I think it'd be fun for us. It's different. It's not going to take a lot of time. It's taken so much time. But it's only taken a lot of time because we have found success in it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it's taken time.
So there was a kitchen there that you use, or did you have to find a kitchen? How does that work?
So with the Wild, we got really lucky. The first we were unlucky. The first year there was no kitchen. So we did everything out of Spoon and Stable. And my team, so Ryan Stetchelty is our chef. He's our chef, and we made him a partner of the business a couple years ago. He would cook everything out of Spoon's kitchen and then drive it to St. Paul, which is about a 20-minute drive from here. And then he'd serve the players. But the reason there was no kitchen is because the Minnesota Wild, they were building their new practice facility.
Yeah.
So when they built that, we went in and helped design that kitchen with them. And so we had Craig Leopold, who's the owner, was really gracious to us. And it's an incredible organization. Honestly, like, we've been so lucky to work with them. And then shortly thereafter, Ethan Casson, who's the president for the Timberwolves and the Lynx, the men's and women's pro basketball league here in the Twin Cities, he ended up signing us as well. And so we're on our second round of contract with them.
Didn't Mark Lohr buy them?
Mark Laurie and Alex Rodriguez, they just bought the majority ownership away from Glenn Taylor.
Gotcha. Now you're gonna get that wonder in there.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, I guess they could probably do in the concessions, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, is this like now something you want to roll out to a bunch of other teams?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to get it rolled out completely because professional sports and professional athletes, they're secretive as to like what their routines and diets are, which I respect.
Yeah.
We also have tons of NDAs. So like nobody could ask, I mean, everybody can ask me, what does Anthony Edwards eat? And I will never tell you. You know, what is Kirill Kaprizov's routine? Don't know. Ask Kirill.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of their secret, which I get, but we would love to be able to roll it out on a more nationwide scale. It's a very niche thing, right? Like, we're focusing our expertise on the players and the coaches, the people that surround the team, the nucleus of the team the most. And what we're doing is we're enacting what we know best about hospitality and food. So, for example, let's say they have a late night game in Vegas and they fly home to Minneapolis and they land at 2:00 in the morning, but they have to be at the rink at 8 a.m. for a skate around. It's not a lot of sleep. Well, they're going to be hungry when they get off the plane. So our team might meet them at the tarmac and put hot cups of broth in all their cars.
Yeah. So
at least on their drive home, they're drinking some warm chicken broth, beef broth, mushroom broth, whatever it is, just with the intent of then they don't go to bed on an empty stomach. They're not going to go home and eat something that's not healthy for them, and they'll wake up revived and ready to go.
It's crazy. I mean, you have a bunch of concepts now. You have Demi, Mara, Spoon Stable, you have Bellecour, which you're running, and then there's another kitchen that you have. You're opening some other spots, which we should talk about.
Yep.
Something I'm always curious about is like, how do you compartmentalize your brain energy on each of these things? You're just telling me that's a lot of effort, right? Like thinking through like the details of like they're going to get off the plane, right? That's a whole, you have to think about that, strategize that, or somebody does, right? And you have this team, and you have Demi, and they're all very, they're pretty disparate concepts.
Yeah.
How do you compartmentalize the way that you use your brain power? And you have kids.
It's discipline. Honestly, a lot of it's just discipline.
But tactically, is it like scheduling? Is it?
It is. I mean, there's definitely a scheduling to it. You know, there's certain days that are like my Mara days, and certain days that are my Spoon days, and certain days that are, KZ provisioning days. But listen, at the end of the day, you know this. You could walk in and say, this is my plan today, and something happens. So, I'm thoughtful in how I take my notes, how I categorize my notes, how I archive them. I'll go through my office and kind of like clean out all of my stuff to like make sure I'm up to date and up to speed on what's going on. And also it helps when you work for a guy like Danielle for as many years as I did, because I worked that muscle with him for like 6 years before I really needed to figure out how to work it on my own. Because by the time I left his restaurant group, I was in charge of Cafe Boulud, New York City, Palm Beach, and Toronto. So 3 big restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, all 3 of them were in a hotel, did breakfast, lunch, dinner, Some did food by the pool. They all did room service. So you talk about just like,
Yeah.
these weren't just 3 dinner only concepts. So I really had to flex that muscle then. And I got to watch him do it with all of his different concepts too. And effectively, I was listening to this guy talk the other day, and it was both profound but very, very clear to me. You kind of have order and chaos, and somewhere in between the middle, you need to like manage both of those. And to what you're saying, it sounds like it can be chaos because you have all these different concepts. But in my mind, I look at all that chaos and say, okay, where's my order in it all? And then I start to filter into order.
Yeah.
And I leave some room for chaos, which is fun.
Is delegation a big part of it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, delegation, collaboration.
How do you delegate the things that you maybe don't want to take off your plate but have to? Because there's the obvious things to delegate, right? My calendar, things like this. But there's things that you probably are really good at that still don't have time to do. Like, how do you delegate those things? And what are they?
I think part of it starts with, you've got to trust, you got to trust the person you're delegating it to. B, you've got to give it up yourself and recognize that you need to get it done. And if you hold on to it and thinking that you're going to be the only one to get it done, it's not, it's not going to happen. And then B, what are you avoiding to get that one thing done? And if what you're avoiding is actually making those other things worse, you're doing yourself a disservice out of both.
Yeah.
Delegation is certainly a part of it. Also, like, I don't spend a lot of time micromanaging. I don't go to my team of managers and leaders and say like, hey, is this done? Because I asked for it to be done an hour ago. It's like, if it's not done, I'll know. And if it's done, I'll know.
If it's not done, what's your approach to?
Why is it not done? What's up?
Yeah, but I mean, are you quick to fire? Are you quick to?
No, I'll talk through it. And our team in the executive like office, in the home office, I mean, they know. I don't necessarily like. I don't expect them to have a set schedule. I just expect them to get the job done.
Yeah.
I don't know what their schedules necessarily need to be. And by the way, when I say that, you nod and understand it in a way that most don't, which is it's the restaurant business, which means our life isn't 9 to 5, 8 to 4, 10 to 6. Like for some people in my business, definitely morning is better. Like my accountants, our director of accounting, Maggie, she might get in here some days at 5 a.m. because that's get the work done, right? Be done at 3. Like it's all good. But for somebody like Erin, who's our director of communications, she probably wants to stay a little bit longer and later at night to get photos in the restaurants and check the vibe and get the feeling of the space because she's dealing with social media and all that, right?
Yeah.
So, and as the leader of all of that, I don't find it's my job to manage that, right? I think it's my responsibility to give them the tools to need what they need to get it done.
Yeah, I feel the same way. We have a culture within Mies of, first of all, it's unlimited PTO, unlimited vacation. You work whenever you want, wherever you want. The KPI is what matters. Like whatever your result that you own is, that's what matters.
Yeah.
And if you want to do that on a Tuesday or on a Sunday, that's up to you. It doesn't work for everybody, by the way. Some people can't operate with that much autonomy. And the problem I have that I think I'm slowly starting to learn is how to approach when things don't go right. Because my immediate reaction is typically, this is some CEO therapy now, is like just to point out like, hey, it's not right. It's not what we talked about. Instead of like asking, hey, why did that happen? What made you you do it that way without sounding like a dick?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that is a product of just being ingrained in me from, I think part of it must be, I remember like every kitchen, Rick Moon's a perfect example. There was none of it was just throw the plate at you. Yeah. Why are you here? Yeah. Go home. Yeah. Why do you want to be a cook? Yeah. Until one day you're doing things really well and then just nothing, And that was just sort of and Boulud is same, worse. And so maybe it's just a product of unlearning those things. But I do find, I don't know if you feel this as a leader, one of the most important skills is how do you actually engage when things don't go well and still keep them, productive.
So part of it is what are the personality traits of the person who's doing the work that didn't go right? So, for example, if you have somebody on your team who is like the taskmaster, you basically know the job is always going to get done, right? If you have a person on your team who is like always filled with ideas and creativity, those tend to be the people that actually don't get it done because they become so distracted. But if you look at it, like those two, the taskmaster person and the ideas person actually work the best together. So if you're not the taskmaster person and that employee is the idea person, you're the wrong person having that conversation with them. And we have somebody in our organization who is that, she is that taskmaster. She will come up with, she will dissect the business in a way and put it back together as if though it was easy, and it's not for everybody. But if she's helping the person who's the ideas person, which tends to be me a lot of the times, then I can distill all of my information into like, okay, what am I trying to say here? What am I really trying to get out there?
Yeah.
So part of it is recognizing which one are you, and then who is everybody else on that team?
Yeah.
And how do you put them together? Because that's really what it is. I mean, if you look at, just take sports analogy. Like we were talking about hockey earlier. It's like, the movie Miracle, right? It's a great movie, but like break it down. Like he picked a team not of the best athletes. He picked a team or best hockey players, right? He picked a team of the right hockey players. So that gets lost in the Disney movie, right? Ultimately, but the idea behind it was somebody, the leader of the team, of any team, my company, whatever, you have to pick a group of leaders, not knowing their full personality and their traits until they end up working for you, and banking on the fact that you've got enough variety in that group to make sure you got the ideas, you got the tasks, you got order, you have all this, right?
Yeah.
That's hard.
It is. How do you get unstuck? You're like stuck on something, you can't figure out how to solve it. Like, how do you find like focus or center or?
It's pretty easy. I just go in the restaurants and I work service. And it's like, that's my zen.
Yeah.
This, what you and I are doing now. And then after this, I'll go into 6 meetings today or whatever's on the calendar.
Yeah.
Right. All of which are important, all of which mean a great deal to me. And I'm excited to do them. But if I just want to be like in my zen state, just go in the kitchen, cook with the team, plate with the team, taste the food, that's the best.
It's a blessing. You get to, step into
it's the best.
Step into a tasting menu kitchen. You can step into this kitchen. You can step into the
and that's
bakery.
So funny too. And today's Wednesday. We're, when we're talking, and so Demi is open tonight. And so we'll go back and I can go back and forth between the two.
Yeah. It's great, man. How do you decide when to do the next thing, right? You're opening more businesses. You're certainly entrepreneurial. You're now going to open, some a spot in Florida.
Yeah.
What's the sort of, the driver that's like, okay, now I'm going to do this next thing?
I would say step one for me is getting together the group who will help me create and do it, and make sure that we're all in a yes for that, or at least the majority. By me saying yes to a new project, it's not just me saying yes to the work, right? There is going to be a tremendous amount of workload that will be put on everybody's shoulders in order to get where we need to go. So I want to make sure that they're on board for that. Personally, I need to make sure that I have the time and the energy to do it, right? And the effort, just knowing like what else is going on in my life. And then creatively making sure that I'm not in that fashion of being stuck, and that I'm ready to sort of say something.
Yeah.
The last project we opened was 3 years ago, which was Mara. Prior to that, it was Demi, and Demi would have been 3 years, but probably 2 years before Mara. So, our growth certainly hasn't been fast in that regard. I mean, maybe it seems that way because yes, we have a fair amount of stuff, but Spoon's over 10 years old.
Yeah.
So we've tried to be very thoughtful and intentional about the growth. And I think the intent is very important, and making sure that we're set up and saying like, okay, if we're going to grow this, like this is what this means. And what I've learned the last couple of years is that when I have leaders who are in our group, and this, right? Like when you're the chef of a restaurant, actually back up, you're a cook. You go from being a cook to a sous chef, it's different. You go from being a sous chef to a chef, it's also different, right? And you're like, your blinders have to open up more and you have to start to see more. Okay. Well, it's the same that goes if somebody who's a bartender and goes from bartending to beverage director.
Yeah.
Or, general manager to director of operations or director of hospitality or whatever those jobs are, what I've really tried to capture and hold on to now is, how do I hold them accountable? But more importantly, how do they go home knowing that they had a successful day? Because when you're a sous chef, you just check off the box. When you're a chef, you don't really have as many boxes to check because you got everybody, right? So like, how do you make sure that that's a success? And I don't pose the question thinking I'll answer it. I pose the question for them to answer. Like, hey, what makes you go home every night saying, now that I'm the beverage director for this group, I have found success today? What is that? What does that look like?
Do you ask that before you offer them the job?
Yeah.
That's a good question to ask.
It's hard. Yeah. Because, the thing is that it's for everybody, that success is different. But the truth of the matter is that what I'm trying to understand is, do they understand that maybe out of the 10 things on their to-do list, 4 of them might not get solved for 5 months?
Yeah.
2 might not be for a year.
Yeah.
And 3 may never get solved at all.
Yeah. Well, and the biggest transition when you move from sort of a independent contributor of something, chef, a cook, whatever, to a leader, is your metric of success is how well everybody below you does.
Yes.
And that's the hardest thing, I think, for most people to see.
Yes.
It's like, whenever you hear a manager complaining about their team, they don't realize you're actually complaining about yourself.
Yes.
Right? They're the ones that you're responsible for. That's, I feel like, the hardest thing to take, to take ownership of is like, no, this is, what am I doing? Like I have a, 2 sort of plaques on my wall at home. They're both these stoic quotes, but one of them is, how are you complicit in the environment that you say you don't want? And it is just part of human nature that we are always finding ourselves in that. I was like, anytime we're complaining, in some way, you're a part of it, right?
Yep.
And as a leader, that's like the most crucial thing. It's like, it's a great question to ask somebody, by the way. It's like, what means success for you? Because if the first thing they say is that I did da-da-da, it's already like, my team is, it's a very different perspective.
Well, and I think it's important to bring up, and we talked about this actually a couple weeks ago, and I still talk about it with them, is that, when we're in a meeting, like let's say all the restaurants come together and get into a meeting, all the leaders, and it's just an operational meeting, nothing big, but important. I think it's important to remind everybody in the meeting that we are the team. So if there is an issue with the company, we are the problem because we created it. I didn't do it. You didn't do it. She didn't do it and he didn't do it. Whatever. We did it. So just remember that when we're talking about the company, we are talking about all of us. Right? And that in itself is an important thing to remind any leader of.
Yeah.
And honestly, pretty consistently, because it's not to say that you're doing anything wrong. It's just more to say that don't be complicit in it.
Yeah.
Think about how else can we be a better version of what we're trying to do. And hopefully, you have leaders on your team that have sort of gone through the line positions to get to where they are. And you can rely on their knowledge of being like, well, when I was only a line cook or a bartender or a server or whatever, this is what I felt.
Yeah.
So if we do X, Y, and Z, this would be better.
Yeah.
That helps.
It really does trickle down. It's not just leaders. There are a million examples in a kitchen where somebody screws up a sauce or they season something poorly, and the immediate answer from the sous chef is, they screwed it up. Why did they screw it up?
Yeah.
Did they have the right recipe? Did you take the time to train them on it?
Yeah.
Did you follow up?
Yeah.
Did you make sure that they were clear? Did they have the right environment? Even if you're a cook and your prep cook didn't clean the petit pois, and you're sautéing them, and there's whatever. There's always somebody that there's always some way for you to take ownership, and I feel like that's something you have to start really early.
Yeah, and what's hard is that it never goes away.
No.
So I think that actually that's what makes it more difficult. And I truly believe that the difference between the people that are really good at this profession and iconic is that the iconic ones never let up on making sure that they're doing it, and that the leaders are empowered to make sure that it's correct. It does not mean that something won't fall through the crack. We're human beings. Of course it will. Of course you'll go into X restaurant that is rated as the best this or that, and you'll have an experience or a dish that you're like, this isn't good. How could, and then, so that's it. I mean, it's like one dish just like changes the trajectory of everything you feel. I don't know. I mean, it seems a little aggressive to me, you know?
Absolutely.
But the iconic, both leaders and restaurant groups and like the qualities that they carry are, that they're always staying focused on that.
Mm-hmm. So I would ask you what's next, but it sounds like I know a little bit about what's next. So what's going on in Florida?
Yeah, so we're going to open up a restaurant in Naples, Florida. So we're partnering with the Four Seasons down there and the Naples Beach Club and Yacht Club. When Hurricane Ian came through, it sort of wiped out that part of that club. And so Four Seasons is built there. And so we're opening up a new restaurant that should open up this fall.
Wow.
So it's exciting, new American cuisine, focusing on the season, the bounty of what we have down there in Florida, but also understanding that there's a relationship and a tie between Naples and the Midwest. We have a lot of people who live in Minnesota in the summer and move down to Naples in the winter.
Oh, really?
To escape the snow. We have a lot of snowbirds that live in Naples. So knowing that we have a lot of Midwest snowbirds, there will be elements of dishes that we do and have done at Spoon and Stable that I'd like to bring down to that restaurant as well.
It's interesting. It's so funny. I met your pastry chef, and Aaron was chatting with me, and my wife is from what I thought was the Midwest. Apparently, it's not.
Where's she from?
She's from this little island off the coast of Lake Erie called Put-in Bay.
Yeah.
It reminded me of that because they all sort of migrate to Florida for the winter.
We tend to see everybody migrate to either Florida or Arizona, Scottsdale in particular.
So that's your next spot.
That's our next spot. Yeah. So that's exciting.
This is great, man.
Thank you.
Really, really grateful that you took some time. I know you got a busy schedule.
Oh, my pleasure.
Oh, you know what I've been doing lately? I'm going to put you on the spot because it happened a few shows ago, and now I just keep asking everybody. So now I feel like I have to index all of them.
Yeah.
Top 5 cookbooks of all time.
That's a great question. Okay, I would say an obvious one is The French Laundry, Michelle Bras.
Why is French Laundry? Because I said The French Laundry, but I got
to me, The French Laundry, because I think it was the first cookbook done by an American chef in the vein of ways we had never seen food done before.
Yeah.
And it sort of married this perfection of like nostalgia and fine dining. The lighting was incredible. It just looked like fantasy. But then at the end of the day, like it looked like fantasy, but then you saw Baskin Robbins like, cone of salmon, and you're like,
it also had such a utility because so many restaurants then just started like literally using that book as like, we're going to start doing menu items based on it.
I agree.
Like poaching lobster and butter, I don't think happened before.
No, and I mean, poaching lobster and butter, or the way they would do the garlic chips or the pepper confetti.
Yeah.
Remember, like the pepper confetti was like a big deal. But I just think he was able to, and that team that he was with, Susie and Michael Ruhlman and everybody, I mean, they created something that only lived in that time. And it's remarkable that you can still look at that book and still find inspiration.
Yeah.
Whereas, truthfully, you can look at a lot of other books and be like, ooh, this just looks really old.
What's ironic is Bouchon is actually a great book too.
Incredible book.
But because it's sort of overshadowed by French Laundry.
I mean, the French Laundry book is just it's so iconic. I mean, it just really is. It's just that book it's that one-off, lightning strike. Like they did it.
All right, what else?
Michelle Bras. I loved the Michelle Bras book. That was another book that did it for me, just in terms of like nature and just like his artistic ability, the way that he thought about food, the way that he thought about plating was just like beyond anything that I could ever imagine, which really inspired me. Charlie Trotter's book, that was all vegetable based.
Oh, the vegetable one, okay.
Mainly because I think the vegetable one was 20 years ahead of its time.
Yeah.
I think he was so forward thinking when it came to that book that it never got the recognition that it probably deserved. And had he come out, if he was alive and he came out with that book 5 years ago, he would be a genius on a different level.
Yeah. I mean, I think the meat one, Meat and Game, was also
good. I mean, so I'll tell you a funny Charlie Trotter story real quick. So when I was 24, I wrote Christmas cards to every famous chef in America every year for no other reason than the intention of maybe one day I'll meet these people.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd slip my business card in there because I was in San Diego, and I thought some of them probably golf or need to go to the beach, Nobody wrote me back except Charlie. He wrote me a letter back, sent me every book he ever wrote.
What?
And from that day on, until he died, we were pen pals. And I have a 3-ring binder at my home of every article, newspaper clipping, magazine article, anything I was ever in. His assistant would find it, even if it was local, rip it out, staple it to a typed out letter from Charlie, which really his assistant did, to congratulate me on the article and what the mention was. But in the bottom right-hand corner was his handwriting, which was really awful, actually. And he would write a beautiful letter saying congratulations for X, Y, and Z. And I literally have every article that I was ever in, which I already knew I was in, sent to me by him.
That's unreal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
And so kind, right?
Yeah.
Jesus. You would never know that about Trotter.
No, exactly. And I think, I will say, I think there's something, generationally, that generation, Danielle's in it, Thomas is in it, JG's in it, Repair's in it. There is a genuine spirit of hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
There's a genuine spirit that they have of making sure that you are learning what it is that they're passing down to you. And I loved that. I really love that. And I think, how old are you?
44.
So we're
43
so we're the same age basically. But we have a tremendous amount of responsibility because we are a generation in this profession where we basically have one foot in that generation and we have one foot in the generation below us because we're in the middle now.
Yeah.
And so we have a tremendous amount of responsibility, not knowing exactly what it is yet that we're going to pass off.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to figure it out in this conversation, but it is something we do need to figure out because what that generation did for us allowed us to do this.
Yeah.
It never would have existed otherwise.
That's true.
But what are we going to do now for that next generation? And I would say that question keeps me up more at night than most other questions.
100%. I think about it a lot. It's interesting because I regret a lot of like the moving away from cooking, and I got a lot of slack from it. Floyd, I remember vividly just being so disappointed in me for not opening a fine dining restaurant and opening a hot dog place, and then when I was getting into this, same, and it's really hurt me it's really stuck with me for a long time. But I've recently obviously sort of embraced there's so much more that I can give, and I think that there is a step function change in the way in which a chef can exist today in such an amazing way, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was, in New York when we were cooking, there was like 20 restaurants you could work out. And now there's hundreds of them that are all good. 20 that were really good that you wanted to actually go stage at. And now there's hundreds of them. So you have so much optionality. You have so much information. And what do you do with that? And how do you actually what do you do with that new paradigm? And there's so many options outside of just, we both have friends, I'm sure, that are 50, 55, 60, and they're kind of done, right? They've been cooking, they're a chef at that age, and they're not, and that's a tough thing, right?
Yeah.
What do you do next?
Yeah.
Planning for that, talking about people like, hey, you can go this route.
Yeah.
But you don't have to, by the way.
Yeah.
There are other things that you can do with your skill, with like what you've learned, with your sense of discipline, and what mise en place means that like can apply to a lot of things. And I think that's a beautiful thing,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. And I think it's definitely, it's definitely going to be a challenge for all of us to figure out what to do and how to do it. But it's important.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah. You got 3, you got 2 more.
Okay. Letters to a Young Chef
Okay.
from Danielle.
All right.
Great book.
Of course you'd say that.
It's such a good book. Both the first and the second one. And then let's see, a last one that I love. It's not a cookbook, but it's a really incredible story. It's called Burgundy Stars. It's about, the chef that committed suicide when we were younger because he got 19 out of 20 in the Gaunt Milo, Bernard Louiseau. The book follows him before all that happens. And it's all about his stars and him getting the stars. It's a remarkable book and written, I don't know how many years ago it was written. I have it in my office next door, but you should pick it up. Maybe I'm a bit of a history bum when it comes to that stuff, but I love reading about the past to sort of understand where we need to go in the future. And Burgundy Stars is kind of one of those books.
All right. I'm definitely going to read it.
Cool.
All right.
Thank
Great,
you,
man.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, you got it.